So what are we doing here, Nate? What is this place?
We are in my home theater
All right.
on New Year's Day.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. 2020, the year from hell has gone.
Thank God.
2021, the show from hell begins. So we are doing here today Closeup, our new show. We were originally going to call it In the Can.
Yep.
I bet you nobody even knows what that expression means anymore.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, film buffs probably do. I mean,
Yeah, they would.
it's a pretty common phrase, I think, in the film world.
Right. So this show is originally we had planned to have this premiere way back last spring. Then of course everything shuts down with the coronavirus. But our hope was to do this as a show that would focus in on movies that are in current release. Deep Focus is looking at films that have been out for a while, classic films, catalog films.
Yeah, and that's probably still going to be our mainstay show, but
But movies are coming out again
yeah,
a little bit.
We need to talk about new films too.
I think, yeah, it's just a way of keeping current with things that are going on, movies we might find interesting, or just movies in general that are catching on with people that might merit some thoughts about the state of cinema today.
And what's our first film, Nate?
Wonder Woman 1984.
I missed all the previous sequels.
I only saw the first one, so I'm 1983 behind.
Better get to work.
Yeah, Wonder Woman 1984. Riding the wave of 80s nostalgia that I think died a year or two ago.
Yeah, and that's kind of the first problem with this movie. I'm wearing my flannel shirt of disapproval today. Last appearance being Friday the 13th.
From the 1980s.
That's right.
When you hate the 1980s, Matt, you wear that shirt.
And this film is, I don't know if the 1980s were as 1980s as the 1980s are in this film. But man, they just hit all the stereotypes right off the bat.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because, so the movie is set in 1984. I don't really know why it's set in 1984. It doesn't factor in majorly, other than, yes, they have some references to the Cold War. You have Americans and Soviets and the threat of nuclear war at a certain point. But even then, that's so light and so late that it doesn't feel like it's a period piece. It's there really for the gimmicks.
You know what? I'm ready to go.
I think we can do better.
It's there for comedic relief, but I think it's also there to capitalize on the recent trend of 80s nostalgia, which ironically makes this film feel kind of dated at this point, because I feel like that is sort of past. Stranger Things probably was the pinnacle of that level of interest.
The It movies also had that, but I think definitely now coming out of the pandemic, no one's sitting around with a super love affair of 1980s movies and TV shows anymore.
Yeah, and granted, this film was delayed, of course, because of the coronavirus. So maybe when it was originally supposed to be released, it would have felt a little more current, but now it doesn't.
This movie, I think where it falls down for me is the fact that it just does not have a good script.
And that's a big problem. I mean, obviously, if a movie has a bad script, it's a problem. But yeah, this film makes some very, very strange choices with its script. It seems to lack the cohesion in terms of tone that you would expect. But just from a basic storytelling standpoint, what are the objectives of the characters? What is this dream stone, which is the focus of the film? Those things aren't really illustrated to the degree that they should be, to give the audience a real sense of the stakes and where the story's going.
We're getting to be old men, Matt, so movies like this aren't really made for you and me anymore, which is fair. I mean, that doesn't bother me, because you aren't a teenager, and so they're not going to be trying to market a teenager action movie to middle-aged men. But I was thinking back to what movies we would have seen when we were roughly that teenage age, like something like Independence Day would have come out, right? Mm-hmm. Which, was that dumb? Yes. Was it fun? Yes, right? And I thought about how, even though that was marketed to like our age group at that exact point in time when it happened to come out, my parents, when they went to see it, still enjoyed it, and it kind of was a throwback to what they remembered with The War of the Worlds when that came out in the 1950s, right? And so I just think back about how those movies had basically the same kind of plot structure and ideas of how to make a movie compared to the generation or two generations before. Mm-hmm. Movies today, especially these kinds of movies, are being made for an audience that I think no longer knows how to watch a feature-length film. I mean, everything now is so compartmentalized and fragmented, and most of your audience is probably going to watch this while on 3 or 4 other devices. They're going to be
Yep.
watching just bits and pieces of it, maybe on YouTube. And so the movie is structured and it's plotted that way, which makes it as a whole suffer.
Welcome to the future. Life is good, but it can be better. And why shouldn't it be?
This film should be called Wonder Woman, Careful What You Wish For. I mean, I think that's the better title, right? And the message of the film seems very obvious when you see the effects of the Dreamstone start to play out in the story. But yeah, it's not established. It seems very convoluted. It seems kind of confusing. Characters are wishing for things. Yes, we're seeing them come true, but we don't quite understand the cost of making a wish until later in the film.
Well, I didn't even know, like, why is there a cost, or how does this cost get calculated, or
Yeah.
anything like that, right? I mean, it's not even obvious right away that there is a cost associated with them, right?
Yeah.
And so it sets up easy enough, right? You have of course this prelude, sort of reacquaint us with Wonder Woman.
And that opening, the American Gladiator sequence, is that what
Right,
you're talking
yeah.
about?
I mean, it's like this big, huge thing. You get the moral of the story kind of surmised by Robin Wright as she talks to the young Diana, who inexplicably is competing with grown women in this Amazonian,
It's not really
I don't
explained.
feat of strength or race or whatever exactly it's supposed to be.
And it feels like it's there to establish the character for the people that didn't see the first film, like me.
Well, yeah, they have the message of, like, you can't take shortcuts.
Yeah.
Because she cheats, because she falls behind, falls off her horse, so she slides down a little hill and then gets caught up with her horse or
For
something like
a
that.
moment there, I was worried that they were going to praise her for her ingenuity. But I'm like, oh, okay, good.
And it
They
introduces
told
the
her that she
armor.
was cheating. Yeah.
Right. So it does introduce the armor that will come back into play later on. So it does do some of those things, but by and large, it didn't seem to really need to be there. Then we go to 1984. We see Wonder Woman doing there's a heist, the robbery,
In a mall.
and very 80s,
And
right?
that part feels very Donnerish to me. I mentioned the tone of this film kind of being problematic, and there's a real inconsistency with the tone. And early on, it feels very Donner Superman in terms of the action, and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, a little bit corny. That's not the way the film is throughout, right? So that opening, you start to see the problems already with just the execution of the action.
Yeah, I mean, that opening action scene, I guess what bothered me about it, and it's a thing that plagues it throughout the whole movie, is the special effects aren't particularly great. I guess I'm getting bored with action scenes where massive feats happen and there seems to be no physical consequences, right? So
Yeah.
people are thrown through things and they
It's very
fall.
cartoony.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always a little bit of suspending disbelief has to be a part of any superhero movie.
Yeah, it is a comic book. It's like, I get that. But it's still set in the real world to a degree, and there still has to be stakes.
So, but she interrupts a robbery. The store seemed to have some sort of special secret hidden antiques, and one of these is this Dreamstone that, instead of being returned back to the store, is then brought to the Smithsonian for study.
Where
Which
Diana
is
Prince
Diana
works.
Prince works, and so does Kristen Wiig as Barbara, the obvious caricature of a scientist with glasses and a new telling, a new variation of the old "she's all that," right?
That's right. Yeah, the trajectory of her character is very, very predictable, and I feel bad for Kristen Wiig because I actually think she's pretty strong, actor in terms of the kind of performance she can provide. But I feel like she's getting typecast. She's doing a lot of roles like this where she's kind of the quirky, sort of outsider character that either gets transformed or it feels very Saturday Night Live, which I think is disrespectful of her range. But her character, yeah, starts out as this kind of plucky scientist type that wants to be like Diana, right?
Yep. And that she makes that wish, not realizing she's making that wish, and that's
Yeah.
what you see. This Dreamstone is granting wishes. People then figure out, oh my gosh, that's what's going on. But this other character, Maxwell Lord, who is clearly inspired by Donald Trump,
No, really?
a con artist, entertainer, kind of TV personality,
Yeah.
who then flukes his way into becoming the most powerful man in the world. Right.
And Pedro Pascal delivers a very, very committed, sweaty performance
He's
throughout this
having
movie.
fun with his role.
Yeah, he's chewing up the scenery. He's really going over the top with it, but his character is problematic as well. I mean, you never really feel a genuine threat from him. He's really kind of bumbling into this power, right?
All I could gather really is his point is he wants to show he's a success.
Yeah.
Right. He wants to be a success.
And that's pretty much it. There's really not much else to it.
I was thinking about the character of Max Schreck from Batman Returns,
Yeah.
played by
Christopher
Christopher Walken, and how you got a sense of a menace to him. You know, he really wants to secretly control Gotham, and he's willing to cut corners. And again, he's just kind of got ambition, raw ambition, right? But you get the sense, well, he has ambition in that movie because he wants to really be the one that's calling all the shots, can grow his empire, and basically tell everybody in Gotham what is or isn't going to happen, right?
Yeah, the Lord character here has none of that, right? He
No.
just seems pathetic the whole time.
Yeah, he's just kind of bumbling. He's stupid. He happens to have only been able to get success because he gets this Dreamstone. And that's fair enough. You can kind of set him up that way. But then you need to have him be like, as he learns his power, gets this power, that he becomes, I want to become like a god, or, something like that, right?
And Kristen Wiig's character kind of follows that trajectory a bit, but she's pretty underdeveloped as well. And it's strange that her character would go from someone who seems pretty naive, yet fairly kind in general, to someone who's, kicking a guy through the street mercilessly. I didn't quite understand that transformation.
Well, so this is where, again, rules need to be established in the
Yeah.
script, right? So this Dreamstone, we learn, not only does it grant you a wish, but it takes something from you. We don't really know how it takes something from you, why it takes something from you, or anything of the nature of that. It just, eventually, it's told to us in some line of dialogue that will happen.
Yeah.
And they figure out that there's the language. They eventually go to the expert, who you really need to go to that expert like right away to
Pretty much in the
explain
beginning,
me
yeah.
as the audience, like I need to know things. So they go to him eventually, and then you learn that, well, it was made by this other god, or the language there is the language of this certain god who plays tricks on people or deceives people or something like that. I don't remember the exact detail of it. But okay, fair enough. Great. But you need to explain to me, well, how does he do that? Or what's this god's purpose? Or how does that work, right? Is he trying to take human form and Max? That'd be one way of doing this. Or something, right? But instead you don't. So it's like, yeah, the idea is, I guess, Barbara loses something of her kindness and of her humanity as she gets her wish of becoming more confident and powerful.
But Wonder Woman isn't like that, though, or Diana isn't like that. And if she's wishing to be like Diana, then she really shouldn't have those qualities. I guess it depends on how far you take the wish in terms of overtaking the original person. But
Well, especially considering that she wished to be like Diana, but doesn't know who Diana is, that she is Wonder Woman, and therefore, how could she have been really wishing to have superpowers? How does the stone know that?
yeah, maybe there's a way she phrased it that kind of escapes that problem. I don't remember exactly the phrasing of her wish, but when we should talk about Diana's wish is to be reunited with her lost love.
Yes,
played by Chris
Steve.
Pine.
Uh,
Trevor.
I was going to say Steve Rogers,
Rogers.
the Captain America character.
Yeah.
It's a DC Marvel crossover.
Yeah, that's right.
So Chris Pine plays her. He was in the first movie. He's brought back in what is a way that makes zero sense, unless one of the writers is secretly a really big fan of Quantum Leap.
Yeah. Yeah, so he basically possesses the body of another man in 1984, It's very strange. I don't understand why the script needed to execute it that way. I mean, if this is a Dreamstone and she's wishing for him to come back, why doesn't he just come back the way he is, or the way he was?
The idea of him coming back is already ludicrous itself, right?
Sure.
So you're asking your audience to accept this idea, fine,
Yeah.
but then just bring him back. Don't do it in a way that raises questions that never get answered, never explored. Because I sat there the entire time thinking, all right, so because you see this scene, it's clumsy and awkward because it's some other guy. Eventually, the camera swirls around and realizes, oh no, it's his consciousness. I'm hypothesizing. It's his consciousness has been put into this other man's body, but presumably this man has a job, friends, family,
Yeah.
who might be concerned that he just left them all and now is off with this other woman that none of them know.
And Diana seems very content just to let that play out without any kind of concern. But at the same time, it's very unclear. It's like, okay, has this person become Chris Pine, or does the rest of the world see this person as the way he was, and only Diana sees him as Chris Pine?
Well, it's got to be that because there's the scene where he's looking in the mirror, right? The
mirror,
quantum
okay.
leap moment. Where,
But us as a viewer only sees him as Chris Pine as well for the rest of the movie. It's very convoluted.
well, because they don't want your audience isn't going to be exploring this. That's again, that's
why
why you
have
don't.
that in there at all?
Well, that's the whole
thing,
point,
yeah.
right? The story is, the script is just kind of creating problems that don't need to exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But that's meant to be the real emotional core of the movie, or at least a large part of it, the relationship between the two of them. And poor Chris Pine just doesn't have much to do in this movie. He kind of falls into the Han Solo in Return of the Jedi sort of syndrome, where he's pretty much along for the ride and doesn't have much function other than maybe some moments of comedic relief and to deliver those more romantic scenes.
Right. I think, I was watching it because a movie like this depends very much on the chemistry between the two actors.
Yeah.
And Gal Gadot and Chris Pine, I just don't think have any chemistry. I didn't think that in the first one. I don't think that in this one even more now. She is a strikingly beautiful woman, but
Yeah, she
is,
looks the part. I mean, she's as Wonder Woman, a very impressive presence.
right. But
Yeah.
she's not charismatic, and I think it's not just because you can't. I mean, she's clearly a model who became an actress, right? That's happened before.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a great actor to be able to do these kinds of parts. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, proved that in his career.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a perfectly good lead or actor or movie star without having a ton of acting talent. But you need to have charisma, and she does not have that.
We won't be doing that today.
Yeah, I would agree, unfortunately. I mean, there were a couple emotional moments in the film that worked for me, but overall, it feels like Chris Pine is pretty much carrying her performance-wise, especially in those more romantic or emotional moments. It's an issue.
I'd be willing to forgive that if I found the action scenes more compelling, but the special effects really aren't all that great. And I think Patty Jenkins, she's obviously done these Wonder Woman movies, but before that she did way back in the early 2000s the movie Monster with Charlize Theron,
Yeah.
which is a very good movie. So she's obviously got talent, but I don't know that she's really good at directing action. It just doesn't seem to be something she naturally knows how to do.
Well, it feels like it falls into that the syndrome of some of the Star Wars movies recently, where the action scenes are all prevised and mapped out, and it's like, okay, you just kind of have to go out and shoot these little elements, and we're hiring you as a director to really fill in the more emotional scenes, right, and then direct those to their full potential. And this feels that way.
Well, and it just seems a little like I'm thinking about that scene where they're in the desert. So Max Lord has basically taken over all the oil supply of the entire world.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get to him to try to get him really just to give up on these wishes. Right? They're not even really trying to see him as a threat yet. They're just sort of, hey, just there's a consequence for this, stop, right?
They don't
And
quite understand
he obviously
the fact
doesn't,
that he's become the stone himself. Yeah.
right? Yeah, and he doesn't obviously want to give anything up. Fair enough, but this action scene starts, which should be kind of a cool action scene, and they do kind of a, it's you said dated with the '80s thing, and
Yeah.
it's, I mean, even the action scenes are dated because they kind of have a Matrix vibe to them, which that super slow motion stuff isn't that interesting visually anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
the way they do it even is just kind of dull. There's a scene or a little shot in there where she's running after the caravan, but because it's in slow motion, it looks more like she's jogging,
Yeah, it looks awkward.
and the compositing is off on the special effects.
But there isn't enough going on in the frame to make you realize that it's slow motion. It's a weird thing. Yeah, it makes, or the speed of the slow motion is off in such a way that it just confuses your brain and doesn't seem to be slow motion. Like you said, it seems like she's doing more of a slow jog.
A movie like this doesn't have to be a genius theme. I mean, usually you want it to be a simple concept. So, like you said, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine theme. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to pull some wonderful insight into it that no one's ever seen or thought of before. You don't really want this kind of movie to do that, to be honest. You want it to be enough meat that you can hang something around it, but not enough that you're going to be like, take it easy. It's just a comic book movie, right?
Yeah, you want a simple premise that's compelling, a story that's well told, that has elements that string together properly, right? A real progression of the story. You want a decent screenplay.
Right.
Whereas, yeah, this film just tonally, it's all over the place.
Well, I think that's part of it. Again, I keep wanting to come back to the screenplay more than anything else, right? It's a 2.5 hour movie. It doesn't need to be that long. It should be 2 hours
At the
tops.
most, with credits. Yeah.
You could probably get this thing done in 110 minutes, really, because you just don't need that much, and you could streamline it. You can get characters together sooner. You can get rid of some of the subplots that they do have in it, like the stuff that they eventually get the president. You don't need that in this movie. It's just there.
That also feels very downerish, though, when they
But
bring
that
the
actor
president
they
in.
got to play the president was so bad.
Yeah.
I was like, did the Screen Actors Guild go on strike and they just got a random guy off the street? I don't know. He's so bad.
Yeah, it was painful, but again, there's a tone issue here. You have those really cornball moments, and there are other moments where you feel like you're supposed to take things very seriously. Another big action scene is in the White House, and then as the film progresses, Kristen Wiig's character becomes
Cheetah, I
is it
think.
the Cheetah or just Cheetah?
I don't know. They
yeah.
wisely choose not to say her supervillain name in the movie. I assume they realized that trying to say that would sound absurd. So, but the visual effect, I thought to myself, man, that is a very unique and interesting portrayal of Cats.
Yeah, it's an
right?
outtake from Cats. It comes across that way.
It
So
just looks awful.
I do like the look of Wonder Woman's armor at the end. I mean, I think the design of that is really great. But at the same time, it didn't really serve a purpose. It didn't really provide her with much of an extra power. It seemed like those wings were this really cheap brass that was just punched through very, very easily. So I didn't quite understand the point of that.
Yeah, well, again, that goes. Everything seems more like a marketing decision than an actual like creative decision,
Yeah.
right? But everything does seem so light. I mean, not to get into the details of the climax, but by the time it's done, the movie's done, you feel like this massive event that should really have shaped everyone's life the whole world over is forgotten. And you go,
It's the reset button.
why? How? What? You know? And that's, I guess, just the nature of movies today. I mean, the movies that we grew up with, I never got the sense at the end of Independence Day that you're right. I mean, it would have been something where you go like, it's probably a lot lighter than how people really would have handled an actual alien invasion. That's how the destruction of cities. But I never had the sense at the end of that movie that people are going to be like, oh yeah, they didn't blow up New York. Like you had a sense that was still around, right?
Yeah.
This one, you go like, I'm not even sure if anyone's actually going to face consequences for anything that took place in this movie.
By the end of it, we're supposed to feel for Max and his son and the relationship there, and it just falls flat in pretty much every way, unfortunately.
So, Matt, would you say this movie is worth seeing or not?
Yeah, I don't think so. You always think about, okay, it's a comic book movie, it's supposed to be lighter fare, it's not supposed to be something to take very seriously. And I'm not expecting a life changing experience watching Wonder Woman 1984, but I do expect a coherent story, a vision that has a consistent tone, well executed action, actors that have some charisma and some chemistry. And it pretty much fails on almost all fronts in that regard.
I would agree. It's not worth it. I don't expect these things to be Shakespeare.
Yeah,
They don't need to be, they shouldn't be, but they need to give me a coherent plot, something you can easily follow, compelling villains, and exciting action scenes. And it just was underwhelming in all those regards.